If I were to ask which of us recently have experienced some form of anxiety, I would expect to see many of our hands raised. Anxiety thrives on uncertainty. I doubt you'll be too surprised by this, but studies are showing that over the past 8 months, anxiety levels have been on the rise. One of the more difficult characteristics of anxiety, I think, is its tendency to snowball. One worry turns into two turns into 4. It feeds on itself, it proliferates, it can escalate and get out of control quickly. Someone recently confided to me that their anxieties have anxieties. They meant it as a joke, but I could tell that their words hit close to home. Scientifically speaking, there's a difference between anxiety and fear. When we imagine that something's threatening us, this is not going to work out well, we tell ourselves. I'm going to fail. I'm not going to be accepted by this group of people. The worry we feel about this perceived threat is anxiety. We're predicting an outcome and then fretting about it before the situation even plays out. Fear, on the other hand, is how we respond to a genuine threat, something that's real and right in front of us. Anxiety occurs in our mind. Fear is a response to reality. Does that make sense? Here's where things get tricky, though. Anxiety often feels like fear. It's persuasive and pervasive. Our brains and bodies easily conflate these feelings. When we're feeling really anxious, for instance, it can be hard to differentiate between what is abstract and what is real, what we're worried about from what we should actually be afraid of. These emotions are going to be a part of life in some form or another. There's no getting around them. And yet I think many of us could benefit from being reminded that we are more than the culmination of our anxieties. We are not the sum of our fears. One of our great growing edges in life is to learn how to recognize these feelings without allowing them to consume us or overwhelm us. Because we simply cannot grow or thrive or face the world deftly when our anxieties lead the way. This, of course, was not news to Jesus. 2,000 years ago, he was preaching and teaching and telling parables about the perils of living in a constant state of apprehension. He's not the only one. I've not done this math for myself, but I've been told that some form of the commandment, do not fear, appears in our Bible 365 times. That's once for every day of the year. Isn't that pretty incredible? So if you wake up feeling worried or anxious later this week, try to remind yourself God has a message for you that day, and every other day for that matter. Do not fear. Our parable this morning involves a wealthy person going on a long trip and entrusting his money with 3 servants, giving them each a share of talents to look after. I think many of us understand the word talent in its current iteration as a reference to someone's natural aptitude or skill. But the Greek word that's used here, talenta, is a form of measuring currency. Scholars tell us that 1 talent, which is the smallest amount of money mentioned in this story, was more than a working class person might earn over the course of their entire lifetime. So take note, Jesus is referencing exorbitant amounts of money here. And yet money is merely the medium for which he's conveying a much more significant lesson. While the first 2 characters in the story received praise for investing what was left of them and earning a return, the third is so afraid of losing what he'd been entrusted with. He's so worried that he might mess things up that he doesn't do anything. He just plays it safe, Matthew writes. He digs a hole. No profit was made because he couldn't bring himself to make an investment. The real message here, however, the one I hope that we will all take to heart, is that fear and anxiety kept this man from living his life. This, I believe, is what Jesus is really trying to talk about. We can go through the motions of being alive without really living. You know, I swallow hard when I think of the life that I myself have missed out on. All the moments that I've lost, either because I played it safe or I was too afraid to play it all. It's really no wonder that so many have endeavored to teach us about the need to move beyond our fears. Ralph Waldo Emerson writes that the person who is not every day conquering some fear has not learned the secret of life. Babe Ruth famously said, "Never let the fear of striking out keep you from playing the game." The enemy is fear, Gandhi writes. We think it's hate, but it's fear. Last weekend, Tate, Alec, and I walked through the FDR Memorial. I was reminded of Eleanor Roosevelt's wonderful quote, "You must do the thing you think you cannot do." This piece of wisdom is found in one of her books, the title of which offers its own sage advice: you learn by living. Eleanor's spouse, of course, paraphrased Thoreau in one of the opening lines of his first inauguration address: "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." To borrow language from the gospel, fear is what compels 1 in 3 of us to hold back and play it safe, rather than risking the unknown. It can limit us, harden us, and hinder us from becoming the people God has created us to be. Fear encourages us to hide who we are and be who we aren't. Fear is what keeps us from stepping into the arena, from making our greatest impact upon this planet. I don't have any recipes or magic fixes to offer you this morning. There are certainly times when life is scary and uncertain and out of control. That's reality. And yet Jesus is absolutely clear. Everything meaningful requires vulnerability on our part. The question this morning for us to wrestle with, and this is a question for both us as individuals and as the Christ Church community, is this: how much are we willing to risk to discover all that God has in store for us? In the name of God.